This podcast is brought to you by the North Dakota Petroleum Foundation. From heating our homes and powering our vehicles to cell phones, clothing, and medical equipment, oil and natural gas makes everyday life better. North Dakota Oil and Natural Gas, advancing the possibilities. Learn more at ndpetroleumfoundation.org. Welcome to the Plain Talk Podcast. Hope you're all staying warm out there as you listen to this, because it is cold, and I don't understand. That's like a totally North Dakota thing, right? We live in North Dakota. We know what's coming every single year, and what do we do this time of year? We complain about the weather. What are you gonna do? Although we're both simultaneously, we hate it, but we're also kind of proud of it because you're looking at like a place like Virginia and they get like 3 inches of snow and everything shuts down. And it's like, that was Tuesday, right? Like, I got up at 6 in the morning. I shoveled 8 inches of snow off the ground. It's 30 below. And then I went inside and got the kids ready for school because that's just Wednesday. Anyway, hey, thanks for everybody who's been listening. As always, really appreciate that. Remember, I produce a lot of content. So if you're listening to the podcast and you're like, gosh, I really like this stuff that Rob does, you can read more of my stuff, plus a lot of other talented people, by subscribing to the Fargo Forum. And by the way, if you subscribe to like the Forum or the Grand Forks Herald or the Dickinson Press or the Jamestown Sun, whichever one of those might be your local newspaper, remember, you get all of our publications for one low price, like $10 a month. It's a pretty awesome deal. So go check that out if you want to subscribe. Also, if you're listening to the podcast by way of Facebook or something like that, and you think, boy, I'd really like to be notified when new episodes come out, consider subscribing to the podcast on the podcasting platform of your choice, whether it's Spotify, Pocket Casts, Apple Podcasts, all of those. Subscribe that way. And by the way, if your podcasting platform allows you to leave a review of the podcast, if you would leave an honest review, I would sure appreciate it. So it's 2022 now, and that means it's an election year. And that means there's a lot of people who are filing to run for legislative offices, statewide offices. All the candidates are filing. But we also live in a very divided political time. And the concept of public service, I don't know. In some ways, it just doesn't look as appealing. I know sometimes people think, oh, these politicians, they run for office, they're elites. I mean, there's a lot of common misconceptions out there. But when you're talking about the people who run, and especially for local offices, like a legislative seat, it's a very personal decision. And these are not like professional politicians. That's a part-time gig. And it's not an easy decision to make. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to have a couple of people who have decided to run for the legislature this cycle. I wanted to have them on the show and ask them, what's wrong with you? No, I'm kidding. Why do they want to run for the legislature? And what are the issues that are pressing in on them? Anyway, Mike Motschenbacher, he's a Bismarck area Republican. He's going to run in District 47, and also we have on Mason Wede, who is going to be challenging Senator Terry Wanzek for District 29 in the state Senate. And Mason, Mike, thanks for your time.
Thank you for having us.
Mike, let's start with you. Why did you want to run for the legislature? Like, just from a public, I mean, we're going to get into the policy aspects and, the leadership North Dakota needs and everything, but just as a practical matter, as a citizen, I know you're a dad, you're a professional, you got a day-to-day life. Why would you want to take time away from that to serve in the legislature so people can yell at you about what a terrible job you're doing?
Well, I mean, great question, Rob. And you're absolutely right. The political environment nowadays is definitely more hostile than it had been in, 20, 30 years ago. But, the short answer is somebody's got to do it, right? We need representation in our districts, in our state, in our cities and counties. And someone's got to have thick enough skin to put up with the negatives that you just mentioned. And, actually just yesterday afternoon, I got a call from a sitting legislator, and the best advice I think I've gotten from anybody that I've spoke to so far is just don't take anything personal. And, I know it's going to be hard to do that, but, I think if you got thick skin and don't take it personal, like you said, I think you can put up with it. But we need representation. We need people to fill those spots, and no matter how ugly it gets, someone's got to take that on. And, I really think I'm George Kaiser was, in the legislature for a long time, and when he decided it was time for him to step down, I just thought that, this is a good time, and it's something I've always been passionate about with politics. And that, Rob, you and I, were involved several years ago in some stuff, and so nothing new to me at all. But I went to my board of directors and asked for their blessing, and then after they gave me the blessing to run, I sat down with my family and talked to them and asked them if they would do it. And of course, they're a little bit harder to convince. And my wife said it the best. She goes, and she asked, "This what you did? Why would you want to, Mike? With the ugliness that's out there, why would you even want to?" And I said, somebody has to do it, and I'm willing to take that on.
Well,
short, long answer.
Yeah, well, Mason, same question to you, and I guess you heard what Mike just said. Somebody has to do it. Is that how you feel as well?
I would have to agree with a good amount of what Mike had to say. On my end, it comes to there's a program that the state funded a couple sessions ago called North Dakota Governor's School. Our funding, unfortunately, got slashed in the 2019 session. We just didn't get the funding that we needed to keep the program going. It's a program that's held at NDSU where high schoolers get almost college-like experience with seeing like science labs, working with actual professors, and kind of seeing what college is like. And it's a program that I'm very passionate about. I worked for the program as a residential assistant and even as a student for 2 times. I think the first domino that kind of made me be like, I kind of want to be a representative for the people is after that session concluded, my parents were at a restaurant and they had ran into a legislature, and the legislature knew how passionate I was about the program and said, I'm sorry that it just didn't work out this session, but you know what, I'll give Mason a call. And I never received that phone call, and I felt like, and I see the national tension that's growing, and I think having a person that sympathizes with these people, feeling like I want to be a legislature for my candidate, for my constituents, and even people outside of my constituency, that I'm a person that they can come to talk to about what they feel like are issues facing our great state.
That's, it's interesting that you say that, because one of the things I wanted to get into is how divided everybody is. So Mason, let's take what you just described as part of your inspiration for wanting to run. Let's take that as a for example. You said it was a good program. You really liked the program. It got cut. You didn't feel like this lawmaker in question provided you a sufficient explanation for why it was cut, or didn't bother to call you. But the reality is that lawmakers are asked. I mean, they're good for something like the budget. Every time you take a vote, you're gonna make a certain number of people upset, right? Because while you wanted that program to stay in place, there were other people with other priorities who were saying, well, these priorities are more important than that priority. So we're glad it got cut because it allowed us to do maybe these other things. I don't know. I wasn't there for the budgeting process. I'm not that familiar with this program, but those trade-offs are there all the time. So on one hand, like maybe you want to talk to somebody and listen to them and fight for their concerns, but that also inevitably means you're going to be fighting against other people's stances. What's going to be your approach when you're in office to handling that reality?
Well, I think sometimes within our political climate, we hear the talking points of sometimes it's us versus them. I don't take that approach when it comes to things. In my eyes, every person in the legislature is a person that loves our state and a person that wants what is best for the state. And that's what I want to bring, is a person that loves our state. And, there might be some disagreements. Mike here might have a disagreement with me on what a percentage of a tax should be within city limits or something like that. But, I think having a good, honest conversation with fellow legislators and constituents can help ease the tension in our nation and even our state.
Do you agree with that, Mike? And maybe the question for you, Mike, is why are we so, because you've been involved in politics for a long time, the same as I have. And listen, we're all passionate about it, and there's always been some sharp elbows thrown and people in the heat of the moment get upset. And I've always felt that was understandable. If you don't care about this stuff, you probably shouldn't be involved. And if you do care about it, it's hard to set aside your emotions sometimes because you do care about it. So that's all tough stuff. But it seems like now everything's turned up to 11, right? Everything is louder. Everything is harder. Everything is more vicious. Why do you think that is right now?
Well, I believe, there's obviously been some, political shift in both parties. But you've got the two factions in the Republican Party. You've got the far right and I guess the more moderate. That's, not taking sides in anything right now, but it's just the truth. There's those two factions in there. But the thing that I am concerned about is we are elected to represent our districts and the state of North Dakota. And what service are we doing to the taxpayers if all we do is fight? And somebody has got to come in there, I believe, with a calming voice and maybe, a little common sense and maybe the ability to, and now I know everybody talks about reaching across the aisle and bringing them across. It's, I think it's a reality, but I don't know how many people have actually attempted it. When I see people, reaching across the aisle, what they're really saying is, I'm going to reach across the aisle, grab their hand, and bring them to my side of the aisle. So, I really think we just need to bring all sides together in a room and just say, hey, we're working for the people of North Dakota. We can't just be sitting there and fighting and
that's what we do, right? Isn't that what the legislative chambers are? Like everybody getting in the same room. It's what it's supposed to be.
Right, exactly where it is. But you've seen it and I've seen it, and especially being a lobbyist this last session, it's just, there's infighting amongst the parties. And I saw so much stuff that just wasn't very constructive. And I really think just bringing someone in that has a calming demeanor that can try to bring both sides and say, hey, let's talk this out. Let's hear what your sides are. Let's hear what our sides are. And then just instead of throwing a vote out, is there something that we can do to actually service the people of North Dakota better?
Mason, one thing. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Rob. That's fine.
Well, one thing, Mason, that I've been thinking a lot about is it seems like everybody's kind of playing to an audience, right? Like you pick a team, like I'm team conservative or I'm team liberal or I'm team Trump or whatever your team is, and you pick a team, and it's almost like performing for that team is maybe more important than governing. And listen, everybody's got to start with like a governing philosophy, right? Like this is what I believe. These are the priorities I think are important. This is my ideology. Those things are not unimportant. In fact, I think everybody needs to start there. But at some point, we just got to plow the damn roads, right? And that's kind of I have this thing like where I want to belong to a political party where that's the logo. Like, just plow the damn roads. Like, I don't need you to impose my culture on other people. Just plow the roads. Do you agree with that? Or am I just completely off the rails? Because I think that's where it's got to start. North Dakota has, we have to pass a budget. We have policy challenges in front of us that need to be debated. And that's what we ought to be focused on, not litmus test or who's the most conservative or who's the least conservative or who's loyal to what. It's about serving the state of North Dakota. Do you see it that way too?
I would totally agree with you, Rob, on that side, and I would also probably join that party to, make sure the darn roads get plowed, because especially after these snowstorms, it's been hectic across the whole state. I think for people that want to get into public service, they can fall into the trap of wanting to be more performative for people. And I think that creates a disservice to the other people that your colleagues in the legislature and even your constituents back home that probably don't really want to talk about the hot button issues and just want to focus on making sure the roads are plowed, as you would say. So
it's not, because Mike, there's a lot of reward out there for politicians who do like to push the hot button, right? Like who do like to focus on the issues that get a lot of attention, but in the broader scope of things maybe aren't as important as we think they are. But there's a lot. Politics, you can get a lot of attention by being performative. We see politicians do it all the time, and they get lots of Facebook likes, and a lot of people donate to their campaigns and everything. There's a heavy incentive out there for politicians to do that.
Yeah, well, as long as you've known me, Rob, I'm not a finger in the wind kind of guy. I've always been about doing what's right, even if it's not what's popular. And, like I said before, we've got to do what's right for the state of North Dakota. That's the bottom line. Even if it's not popular, you have to do it. And I think, and I'm not criticizing any of the current legislators at all, but I'm just not sure 100% of them, have the same mentality. A lot of times they'll do what is politically correct and not what is correct for the state.
How would you, Mike, go about explaining, because you said doing what's right. Obviously, you have in your mind an idea of what's right, and that's as it should be. We all do. But there's people out there who are going to disagree with you on any given issue. Right. So how would you approach a constituent where you took a vote and the vote represents your convictions? I think this is what's right. But how do you articulate that to a voter who comes up to you and says, I think you got this wrong. I think you got this completely wrong. How do you handle that as a lawmaker?
Well, you're going to have facts. You're going to have figures, and you're going to have more information. And, you're going to have to be able to explain this to your constituent of why it's the best. And, a lot of times, and this is just in the 20 plus years I've been involved in politics, they don't have all the facts. And so, something that looks good on paper, when you dig into these laws and these bills that are written and such, there's some of the fine print in there which would, I guess, institute unintended consequences and such, as sometimes you have to vote against a good bill or amend out part of it or whatever. But you're going to have to explain this to your constituent why you voted your way, and you better have some good reasoning why you did it. If you just vote against it because and don't have any reasoning, then the constituent's right. So you're going to have to come back to them with correct answers and a good, confident reason why you voted the way you did.
Mason, let's switch and talk about why you're running in terms of policies and priorities. What's the biggest problem facing North Dakota right now? Like, if in your mind, if you get elected and you go to the legislature, what's at the top of your priority list?
Well, I am running on a platform of bringing income tax relief or elimination. We have seen across the country with states that don't have income tax or have very low income tax like us right now, and I think possibly eliminating it could be a benefit for the state. A lot of people are starting to, get jobs where they can live wherever they kind of want to live, and I think an enticing spot for possible people that want to just live here and work from home is North Dakota. We have a lot of great opportunities for starting a family here, safe communities, everybody's involved, everybody wants to make sure your kids are safe, everything's good. And the second part is bringing economic and job development to North Dakota, and even hopefully my rural areas of North Dakota, because, in the last 2 years, we've seen a lot of shipping delays, a lot of manufacturing goods that we could probably hopefully start making in the USA to, ease the shipping delays and everything and bring jobs back to North Dakota. And, one issue that really isn't talked about a lot that both of my platforms talk about that are trying to address is North Dakota has what I would call a brain leak. We have a lot of talented people that have very smart, very gifted people, but, after they get done with high school, they just decide to pack up everything and leave. And that could be a lot of different reasons, just better job opportunities or just not having connection with their hometown anymore.
Yeah, I think those are interesting priorities. I like the idea of eliminating the income tax, but one rebuttal to that I've always found compelling, although I have no love for the income tax, but a rebuttal is that North Dakota is already hugely dependent on oil tax revenues. To the point where, depending on oil prices, but at any given time, about $1 out of every $2 collected by the state tax department is coming from the oil industry. And the oil industry obviously can be volatile. It's a commodity market. The prices go up, the prices go down. We've all seen what happens when the bottom falls out of the oil market. That's a tough thing for our state government. So one of the rebuttals is that if we chop off one of the legs of our tax stool, to use that metaphor, that we're going to make the stool less stable because we have less sources of revenue. Now, to me, that makes a lot of sense. So what would you say to somebody who's saying, listen, we don't want to get rid of income tax revenues because it's just us putting too many eggs in one basket?
Well, I think there's an opportunity with our legacy fund there. I think the legacy fund is being set up to where it is going to be a benefit for all North Dakotans, whether you've been here for generations or you're just deciding to move here recently within the last 5 years. And I think, what we get from the interest payments of the legacy fund itself could eventually help, remove that stool and replace it with the interest that we get from that legacy fund.
That's an interesting idea. And I know Representative Craig Hedlund from the Jamestown area has pushed legislation in that vein previously. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out. Mike, same question for you. You get elected to the legislature. You're coming into Bismarck. What's at the top of your priority list?
Well, I actually have similar priorities as what Mason does there. We should continue to lower both corporate and personal income tax. I have the same goal of eventually phasing out both, and same thing with the legacy fund. I think it's to the point now where we can start using that to replace some of the revenues we would lose. But however, if you look at some of these states like Florida and such, there's states that don't have income taxes, there's states that don't have sales taxes and such. And if you look at those states, they've got some of the stronger economies in the United States. I think there's a fear, of course, that if you get rid of that income, that it's not going to be replaced.
Yeah.
But one of the solutions is, if you get rid of income tax, that's more expendable income. Corporate income tax, it's the owners of the company are going to have more expendable income. You get rid of the personal income tax, people are going to have more money in their pocket. They're going to spend that money, and as you know, North Dakota has sales tax. So that 5% sales tax that North Dakota has right now, people are going to spend more. You're going to see an increase in revenue there. We also have other opportunities with tourism and agriculture and such. Although agriculture is also volatile, I think we've done a fairly good job of diversifying. Yeah. And you're right, 1 out of 2 cents collected right now is from oil. But we continue to diversify and get new forms of income, or increasing ones that we have. We can benefit from that.
Well, I think I think diversification is the key, because right now you're right. We've made progress. We're not as diverse as we could be. And I didn't want this show to turn into a debate about the income tax. Because I'm largely with you guys. My one concern is you look at a state like Florida, or you look at a place like Texas or even Arizona, their economies are a lot more diversified than we are. And as such, they are not as beholden to the swings of the commodity markets, agriculture and energy, as we are. So it's sometimes it's hard, I think, to compare us to them, because they have very different economies than we do.
If I could interject on that point, if you mind, Rob,
sure,
about that. Another idea with the legacy fund that goes back to my economic and job development is, we have a lot of small communities in rural North Dakota that, are unfortunately not going to be around probably within the next 150 years. And I think having the legacy fund and using it as an investment opportunity for attracting businesses and even more companies to come and put a footprint in North Dakota to help diversify our assets, to make sure we're not going to be in the swing commodity state like with the energy sector and the agricultural sector.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. The other thing I worry about using legacy fund dollars, though, to replace income tax dollars is I like the idea of citizens feeling the cost of their government, right? Like if I make a decision in my household budget that we're going to buy a new big screen TV, or we're going to get some new streaming service subscription or whatever, I feel the cost of that, right? Like that money comes out of my bank account. I feel it, and I have to make a decision whether the cost is worth the benefits. And I worry that if we start offloading the burden of government onto something like the legacy fund, which isn't directly paid for by the taxpayers, that we're going to lose that very important link between the size of government and what it costs individual taxpayers. Do you understand what I mean? That's something that worries me a little bit as well, Mason. Are you there? Did we lose Mason?
No, I'm still here. I totally agree with you. Sorry about that. I was shaking my head and I realized now I probably shouldn't.
Yeah, it's a not a visual medium, Mason. Well, I appreciate you both coming on with me, and again, it is interesting. I guess I like election years, and I think especially now we're spending so much time talking about American democracy in the context of what happened on January 6th and everything else. And I think it's so important because one thing that I had to learn in my career writing about politics is that, there's no permanent victories. I think sometimes the news media and the politicians and the activists and the pundits and all those, they have a vested interest in making every debate seem like the final battle, right? It's the final countdown and we're all in it. We're all in, everything's on the table and we got to win this. And I think that, first of all, that justifies a lot of the terrible behavior in politics that I think we've been talking about a little bit. But on the other hand, I mean, it forgets the fact that, okay, even if you win that debate, you still got to live with your neighbors, right? The people who opposed you are still there, and they're still part of the government, and there's always another election looming, right? It's no election, there are no permanent victories, and no election is the last one. And that's something I think that is really, I don't know how you guys feel about it, Mike, but that's something that's really been coming home to me, and I've really been thinking a lot about of late.
Well, it's something I always, think about too. But like I said before, I'm not a finger in the wind kind of guy. I realize I'm going to have to, if elected, I'm going to have to live with the votes that I cast, and I'm prepared to do that.
Mason, final thoughts as we wrap up.
I think that with the growing stuff in the political atmosphere to be quick and responsive, I think we need people that are going to take a step back and be more looking at the long-term answers about possible issues instead of trying to get the clickbait answers and trying to get the views on Facebook.
You're right. Yeah. I a long time ago, maybe you guys will like this story, like years and years ago, they used to hold such a thing as blogger conferences. Can you believe that? Can you believe anything nerdier than it was worse than a Star Trek conference. I mean, it's a bunch of nerds in the same room. But anyway, one of the speakers at one of these events, and this was like the early days of Twitter, we were having a panel discussion about like how to use hashtags. This is how early this was in the whole social media phenomena. And one of the speakers actually said in the future, if you want to get your political message across, you're going to have to boil it down and put it on a cat meme. And I remember thinking at the time, like, that's funny anecdote, but that can't possibly be true. But now it's 2022, and I'm thinking, gosh, that's kind of true, right? I mean, that's how we talk with each other. That's how we argue now, is through memes. And boy, I'm just not here for it, gentlemen. But I appreciate you both coming on, and good luck. Mason Wade, of course, is running for the state Senate in District 29. There's an incumbent in that seat, Senator Terry Wanzek. Mason is I shouldn't ask you for, I guess it's up, but is he running? I guess I should have checked before the show. Is Terry running for another term?
During my quick research, there hasn't been any news stories coming out about whether or not he's deciding or not.
I don't know if he's announced yet or not.
I've heard sources it could go either way, but
Sure.
I'm not going to comment on that right now. And I look forward to the competition that I have against Terry. And
Sure.
I think 29 is going to be in a good spot no matter who they elect.
So that's District 29, and again, Mason Wade. Last name spelled Wede. If those of you listening want to check out him, and if you live in District 29, maybe you want to give him your consideration. And of course, Mike Motschenbacher running for the State House of Representatives in District 47. I'm not going to try to spell Mike's last name for you. You'll just have to guess. Google will probably figure it out for you. Mike, Mason, thanks for your time.
Thank you for having us, Rob.